Paragraph 4 is if you own 10% or more of the property, or you have a relationship with them. Paragraph 5 is earnest money. Yes, absolutely. So there's some potential changes that are going to be made to the paragraph 5 of the contract. And the reason being is because right now, paragraph 5 is not a time is of the essence paragraph, and there's no real definition on when the earnest money actually has to be delivered. We've always used the rule of thumb that 48 hours is a good amount of time to get it there, but there's no true, it absolutely has to be there by this time. And they're working on changing that, and chances are on February 12th, when the new contract is voted on, that will be changed, and there will be some things that go into place that will help us to understand exactly how that's going to work. So we're going to talk a little bit about that this morning. All right, so contract changes, several small changes, which we'll go over in a full contracts class. The big one, the main change, is about the earnest money. So we're going to talk about that this morning. And as you can see here, they made it look like a rainbow with all the different changes that have been done. Anything that's in red is currently in the contract. The yellow is changes that have been proposed, and the blue is things that are probably going to end up in there. But we'll go ahead and read the whole thing to make it make sense. So we'll read everything that's not strucken out. So earnest money. Within 3 days after the effective date of this contract, buyer must deliver blank as earnest money to blank as escrow agent at the property address. Buyer shall deliver additional earnest money of blank to escrow agent within such amount of days after the effective date of this contract. If buyer fails to deliver the earnest money within the time required, seller may terminate this contract or exercise seller's remedies under paragraph 15 or both by providing notice to buyer before buyer delivers earnest money. If the last day to deliver the earnest money falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or a legal holiday, the time to deliver the earnest money is extended until the end of the next day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. Time is of the essence for this paragraph. So what do you think about that? It's too wordy? Okay. Yeah.
I have a question, and this is maybe semantics, but what is the difference between must and shall? Because I was always told shall was will, which means they will do it. But why did they choose to change shall to must?
Bill, you have any input on that?
Anybody can figure that out needs to buy a lottery ticket.
So he said anybody that can figure that out needs to buy a lottery ticket. They mean the exact same thing, right? Yeah.
No, shall is a conjugation of should, right?
It means will.
Yeah, I mean, they could have put will, they could have put shall, they could have put must. I think the reason they put, if I had to guess, the reason they put must on there seems a little more definitive and absolutely has to be done. They could have put that. They chose not to. I don't know why. Irv?
So is that still at 5 o'clock?
No, this is not regarding the option period. The option period is going to stay the same. That'll still be at 5 o'clock. This right here is just by the, well, obviously you're going to have to get it there by the close of business at the title company. So if you have a title company that stays open until 11:59 p.m., then I guess that's going to be okay.
Start learning their addresses, their personal addresses.
Yeah. If you have a good title company that gives you their home address and they're willing to receipt it at home, you can certainly do that. I would make it a good rule of thumb to do it by 5 o'clock that day, and to not go further than that. Any other questions about this, other than it being too wordy? Yeah.
What if all the blanks, what if all the spaces for words are blank? What does that mean?
If all the spaces for the words are blank, what do you mean?
If everything there is left blank, what does that mean?
There hasn't been anything rendered for any earnest money.
Earnest money is no longer a threshold for
Correct.
Texas real estate contract.
Yeah.
1989.
Yeah. So earnest money is not required in a contract. Doesn't have to be done, and it doesn't even have to be money, right, Bill?
Goats, children,
Yeah. If you wanted to put up a chicken, like I've said before, you could put up a chicken if they're willing to accept that as the earnest that you put up for the property. Children? Oh, he said children, yeah. Firstborn, stuff like that. So yeah, if you don't put anything in here, this paragraph is not going to apply to the contract. So, yeah, just like if you don't put anything in the option period, that paragraph 23 of the contract is not going to apply. You just don't have an option. So, other than it being too wordy, is there anything else that you have questions about on here? Yes, Julie.
Okay, they are supposed to vote on this on the 12th, so when does it go into effect?
My understanding is that once it has been passed, it will be available for use immediately,
Okay.
voluntary use immediately,
Okay.
and then they'll mandate a certain date. Ava said it's usually 30 to 60 days.
Sometimes as long as 90.
Sometimes as long as 90 days in order for it to be has to be used on this date. And then you can no longer use the previous contract.
Okay, I have some weird questions. I have more questions than that.
Bring them.
So if they pass it on the 12th, 30 days later, they have to do it. Do they change the real estate, the Trek exam to reflect the new changes?
Once a year.
Once a year.
Once a year, and when is that once a year?
It's effective January the 1st, so.
Effective January the 1st. So the current real estate classes will be teaching the previous contract through the end of the year.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
Yeah.
So do not tell my classes anything about this.
Well,
That's my question.
that's a really good question. So what I tell all of the new agents that come in that I interview that are considering getting into real estate is don't pay attention to any of the changes that are in the process of being made until after you have your license. And then we will teach you what you really need to know about what's going on with the contract, because if you go and tell them all of these things and they go out of the test and the test has nothing to do with what paragraph 5 currently is but wasn't before, then you're putting them in a
That's interesting.
interesting
I was wondering
position.
how often they updated the Trek test according to the changes in the contract.
I didn't know until now. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
Once a year. So,
Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah.
For now.
yes.
Okay,
Stephanie.
So we're talking about the seller may terminate the contract. Are they going to be coming out with a new termination of contract to reflect that the seller
We're
is terminating?
Gonna get there in just
Oh,
a couple
sorry.
minutes. Yeah, you're like 3 slides ahead of me.
Sorry. It just caught my eye because that's really the only
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
that
So
it's-
even with this paragraph included in the 1 to 4 family contract, it's still a very buyer-friendly contract. There's a lot of outs for the buyer. There's not a whole lot of outs for the seller. This gives the seller one more out. And it's really the only one that will apply most of the time for the seller to get out of the contract. The other ones are natural disaster and a couple of other things. But it's really buyer heavy. And we're going to have Reba Saxon come and teach the buyer outs of the contract class again. I believe it's on March 28th. I'll double check the date and send it out to you guys. But there's 34 different ways that a buyer can get out of the contract. And she's going to teach us all of those that day and give us a whole book on all the different things that your buyers need to know. It's called Seller Beware. Yeah.
Best class, is there anything that was-
It is absolutely one of the best classes, yes.
I mean, you go through that contract piece by piece by
Mhm.
piece. It's fabulous.
Yeah, yeah. And she's hilarious. So it's not like being in a long 8-hour class. It's like being in a comedy session because she shares a lot of really, really funny, appropriate to the real estate contract jokes. So, yeah. Any other questions about this?
Yeah, what's an illegal per illegal? Do you have illegal holidays in this country?
Do you have illegal holidays in this country? Well, I'm sure that there are some people who celebrate some holidays that aren't necessarily legal. But if the bank is closed that day, it's going to be a legal holiday. If schools are closed that day, it's going to be a legal holiday. If the title company is closed that day, if the title company is closed that day, it's a legal holiday. Now, if the title company has some disaster or something like that and can't open their doors that day, most of them have affiliates in the area where you can go and get your option money or earnest money, or your earnest money receipted, rather, not your option money. Don't ever do that. You can get your earnest money receipted there. But it's really talking about bank holidays and school holidays, things like that. So that.
Summer vacation,
What's that?
not summer vacation.
No, it's not talking about the whole summer. No.
Sorry, just
You're good. Any other questions on this? All right, so let's go to a couple of scenarios. Days are days. Those of you who want working days, get over it. Those are Avis's words. She put this together for us. Consider this. Monday, February 19th is President's Day. If this paragraph were in effect on the contract you used for a sale whose effective date was Wednesday, February 14th, wow, you could deliver the earnest money on Thursday or Friday. Say you didn't. Thursday the 15th is day 1. Friday the 16th is day 2. Saturday the 17th is day 3. Oh, it's a Saturday. I can't believe she wrote it like this. So then Sunday the 18th is, well, Sunday, and the 19th is a holiday. Therefore, the earnest money must be in the hands of title on Tuesday the 20th. Or, this is the fun part, or after the deadline on Tuesday, the seller could say, give the buyer notice that I am done with them. Then the race is on for whether the seller gives notice to the buyer before the earnest money is delivered to title. So let's say that it's basically who gets to the courthouse first, or in this case, who gives their notice first. And it could be a competition as to who gets the money there first. So if the seller gets their notice to the title company first that they're killing the deal because the earnest money hasn't been delivered, they win. If the buyer gets there before that notice has been delivered to the title company, signed by, and we'll talk about that notice in a minute, signed by the seller, and the buyer gets their earnest money there first, they still got a deal.
Is there a timestamp
That's a
for
new
the title
reality
company
show.
now?
What's that?
Is there a timestamp for the title company now?
I don't have the whole form with me, but I would imagine there'll probably be something on there like that. Do you know if there's a timestamp on it, or?
Well, so how you
Yeah.
do that?
It's going to be kind of, you just write it in there, and you're kind of going to have to take their word for it. It's going to be kind of tricky how it all plays out, because this is this could really come into play if you were in a multiple offer situation, and let's say that somebody else brought a backup offer that was $5,000 higher than what they just went under contract for. If I were the seller, I'd be sitting there waiting, hoping that first thing Tuesday morning after that holiday shows up, or no, after Monday, whenever the third day ends, I'd be waiting for that next morning saying, I'm going to get there first thing in the morning with that piece of paper so that they don't have the ability to buy the house from me anymore.
So if they didn't deliver it by close of business on Tuesday,
Close of business on the third day.
But if
Yeah.
the third day was,
If the third day was a holiday
or a weekend.
or a weekend, then it extends one day to that
In this
next day.
case, it would be Tuesday, by end of business on Tuesday.
By end of business on Tuesday, so they'd have the ability to take that notice on Wednesday morning if earnest money has not been delivered.
Why Wednesday morning, why not Tuesday at 6? After close of business?
What do you think about that, Bill?
Well,
What do you say?
What if it's 6 o'clock on the third day? I think that it's probably going to be one of those 11:59 things, because they have the ability to find somebody that day to receive the earnest money who is a agent of the title company.
it doesn't say receive, it says deliver.
Delivered.
So you can send those things electronically. You can send monies electronically.
Yeah, you can send it a wire.
We lose sight of the whole thing here, though, is do you have a willing buyer and seller?
Yeah.
And if the seller's saying, I don't wanna do this anymore, I think they just need to have a really good, capable, qualified agent to document it,
Mm-hmm.
to say, we put you on notice, and we're moving on.
Yeah.
There's a famous quote in a lawsuit that started paragraph 23, where Wallace Jefferson says, it is far more important to have a meeting of the minds than it is the ceremonial delivery of the money. And I think that applies in some instances here.
Can you say that quote one more time? Because I think it's really important for our whole industry.
It's in a lawsuit called Jopish versus 1464 Limited, where he said it is far more important to have a meeting of the minds than it is the ceremonial delivery of the money.
That's really good.
I think it's very profound based on the attitude of the parties.
And how many times is it more about the conversation than it is about the money to begin with?
I think it's who gets to have the last word, or I think it's who gets to what agent gets to put their fingerprints on something.
Yeah.
All too often.
I agree. So that form that we were talking about would be the new form that's being proposed. basically for the seller to say, I'm out of here, is this one right here. It's called Notice of Seller's Termination of Contract. And then they get a check, 2 boxes. Buyer failed to deposit the earnest money within the time required under paragraph 5 of the contract and before the time seller delivered this notice to buyer. And then other, you'd have to identify a different portion of the contract that would allow them.
It could be a hot check.
Yeah.
Hot check. A check is simply a promise to pay.
So say that again. Clarify that.
Paragraph 2, you could put in there, based on the fact that the check was returned unpaid by your banking institution, and then the underlying reasoning is that a check is nothing more than a promise to pay.
Okay, so right now, as the contract is written, if they delivered a hot check to the title company, would the seller be able to get out of the contract because the earnest money was not delivered correctly?
Where you're reading my notes now from my presentation, I think it all falls on who has the best lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, I think they could get out of it.
Okay. So this one right here, this is a form you'll probably see available to you after the 12th of February. And we will have more classes on these specific forms and the new contract as soon as we hear that it has been passed. So the first week in March, expect that we'll have a full class on the new contract and any addenda that they've created to go along with the contract. Yes?
Will TAR be adopting the same language?
They don't adopt anything. They simply copy what the commission is. This is a promulgated form with mandatory use. TAR just convenience, puts a number on it and sticks it in their library. But they can't change that form.
Any other questions?
It's probably a stupid one. And I'll
Yeah,
just go ahead.
there's no such thing.
Sorry. Okay, I guess I'm hung up on the deposit, deliver. I mean, when you deliver a check and they receipt it,
Is that
it's not
deposited?
deposited?
Okay, so receipted would be the best word to use here. And on the 1 to 4 family contract for the one that's being proposed and will probably pass on February 12th, the last entire page of the contract is just one page for receipts. There's going to be a receipt of the contract, and then a separate receipt of earnest money, and then a separate receipt for option money. As it stands right now, the last page of the contract has a receipt of earnest money and contract, and we know that sometimes the contract will get there before, and so they can't receipt the earnest money without a copy of the contract. So it just is going to allow things to look much cleaner so that you can document exactly what has been delivered to them. Because most of the time, if you go to a title company and they don't have the contract yet, they're not going to accept the earnest money because they don't have anything to base it on. So
It would be fabulous if that language matched then the contract, because deposited is an interpretation versus received.
Hey, lawyers gotta have something to do. You know?
do you know if it's still open for commenting?
No.
No.
But I think the word deposit carries a connotation to giving it to a financial
Yeah, that's what I'm
institution.
saying. To me, that's a different.
I don't think it's applicable in this instance.
Yeah.
You're not going to the bank.
Title company is.
Yes.
That's pretty valid. That's
So
a very valid
loophole
argument.
that we know we can get around if we need to.
I was gonna say, I mean, lawyers gotta keep their job and keep
I don't
That's
think
what
it's
I'm
not
saying.
according to the contract.
It would probably make more sense if that said buyer failed to deliver
Yeah,
Probably make more sense.
the earnest money.
to the title company. Can you
To-
deliver wherever you want?
Making it crystal clear. Yes.
Yeah, it needs to match. The language
Yeah.
needs to
Okay. Well,
Is it?
it does refer back to paragraph 5,
It does.
and paragraph 5 is very specific on where the earnest money needs to be delivered to. So I do think there's a little bit of a flaw with that, and thank you for bringing that up, Sue. It should say delivered. It doesn't.
The commission has the ability from the dais to change that word as a non-material change, no material fact. So if somebody brings it up at the meeting, they can change that one word with no consequence, no sending it back, no nothing.
Okay.
And I think it should also have 3 different pages for all those receipts, because the option money, when you're getting that signature, it's on a, you know, it's a different time and different person rather than the one doing the earnest money.
I think the reason they leave it all on one page is so that everyone can see when it's been done, and that all of those things have been done without having to go and look for separate pages. And a lot of times what the title companies will do is just kind of transpose it all onto one piece of paper anyways.
Consolidate it.
Yeah. So, any other questions about this stuff? That's my last slide for it. Any questions about anything else in general? Anybody working on any deals they want to talk about?
It's raining outside.
It is raining outside, yes.
I need a recommendation
Yeah.
for a well company, installers that will.
Somebody to
dig-
install a well? Where
yeah,
at?
to dig a well.
Where at?
In Florence.
In Florence? Does anyone have anyone they recommend?
I know who I don't recommend.
That's a good place to start too.
Yes.
That guy in Gerald that is right next to Avis.
You mean Al?
Yeah,
What's his name?
bad experience.
I'll give you the information later.
He doesn't keep appointments.
Okay.
I'm just saying, he's been in business a very long time.
The guy in Elton, he broke 2 appointments. He doesn't show. For me personally, he didn't show up 2 different times when we had appointments for him.
Got it.
And we stayed home just for him to show up twice.
All right.
So have plenty of patience.
Anyone else have a good one that they recommend?
There's one in, Dripping Spring.
Oh, he's awesome.
I might have that.
And,
You think you have that, Tom?
and he has a representative here in this area in Williamson County. I've switched from Alpine to this guy.
Okay.
It's Dripping Springs Water Well.
I don't
Oh, who
know.
is it?
New Florence?
I know, I used to work with the daughter at Dell many, many years ago.
Well, he has a representative here in.
I do recommend him.
Oh, okay, thank you so much.
Anyone else got anything? Any other questions about any proposed changes to the contract? Most of them are pretty straightforward. This is the most major one, like it said on the slide. The other one is really the last page of the contract that has the receipts on it. I think that that'll allow for more clarity within the contract, because then you have clear times when it was delivered, and the contract and the earnest money they're 2 different things, and it makes sense that there are 2 different spaces for that to be delivered. So, anyways,
I have a question. Who
yeah.
educates the title companies on the importance of putting a time on there? Are they made aware of that when the change comes through, or is it their own agreement?
Well, go ahead.
TDI, I mean, that's.
The Texas Department of Insurance would be one, but really the 1-to-4 family contract, in my opinion, is kind of a pretty interesting thing, because you've got 2 different agencies that are kind of crossing each other and working together on something, but the title company is not really a party to the contract, and there's certain things that are expected to be lived up to by the title companies, and if they don't live up to them, it's not really on them for being at fault. Like in the survey, the paragraph 6 of the contract, it talks about some things that the title companies are responsible for, and commitments and all that stuff, and the delivery of them, but they're not technically a party to the contract, so it can get kind of sticky. Yeah.
Did they put a time on it?
I think it answers your question right there. Seller notifies buyer. It doesn't say title company.
Yeah.
It doesn't say Uber, it says buyer.
Yeah. So seller has to notify the buyer, but that's probably going to be done through us.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
contracted you to.
They've contracted us to represent them. So,
BK Drilling.
Yes.
light bulb.
I was using it, I was
The
Googling
good one
it.
or the bad one?
The good one. Yes.
That's a good one, BK Drilling's good.
Hang on one second.
One, too.
They all said that.
Okay. We'll get to it in just a second. Astrid.
I mean, it is the title company's, responsibility to put that stamp on there, but, for your client, if you know you're cutting it close, you get that paper back, as they receipted it, can't you just be like, hey, will you timestamp it for it's not that.
I don't think it's
If it's-
defendable though.
No.
I think it's on an actionable notice.
So then what constitutes delivery?
Give it to that buyer's agent.
Or
Yeah.
receipt of delivery, because we have that official notice paragraph. We're gonna put the buyer and the seller.
Where a buyer says, I did deliver it.
It hasn't been delivered though. It has not been delivered to the
Per the agreement,
to the title company based upon paragraph 5.
So should we start having our buyers do the delivery to the title?
No, I just think that if you're going to do it for them, just make sure you do it.
Well, sure,
Yeah.
I'm going to, but.
Yeah. Yeah, if they
I'm
if
just thinking
if
of
they
another agent could get
if
into
they
it.
give you the earnest money to take to the title company, just make sure it gets there because they have hired you as their representative for the transaction. So you have the ability to go and act on their behalf and take that money to the title company. If they wanted to give it to Joe Schmo to deliver it to the title company, they could theoretically do that too. It just has to be delivered to the title company. The title company doesn't really care how it gets there.
You need to kind of go back and kind of look at what you've been doing in the past. And it's not going to be that big of a change, but just be very alert and where everything gets in everybody's hands correctly.
Yeah, the biggest change to this right now is I would say this. I've seen some other areas outside of Williamson County where whether the earnest money gets there or not could really some of the agents on the other side, I could really care less if it gets there or not. We'll bring you the earnest money at closing. That's not okay, but the contract doesn't say that it has to be there in a certain time frame. So this, going back to Bill, anybody could hire a lawyer to argue whatever side they wanted to, and whoever's got the better lawyer is probably going to win. Just like somebody once said, nothing is illegal if you have the right attorney. So yeah.
This kind of goes back to the lender too. I tell my buyer or seller, whichever one I'm working with, that as soon as the earnest money is received, the faster the buyer can start working on their approval for their lending. Because doesn't the lender have to have a receipted contract to get started?
They have to have an executed contract to get started. Most of them.
A lot of them need to receipt it.
They'd like to see the receipted parts
Yeah.
stating that money has been delivered
So
to the
that's why I tell
earnest
my clients
to the
to
title
get it to
company.
the title
Yes.
company fast.
Yeah. The faster you get it there, the better off you are, because then then they know that money's been accounted for and that they already have that toward the down payment of the home if they choose to apply it toward the down payment of the home. Yeah.
That was a long sentence.
Yeah, it was. It's one of those run-ons they taught me not to use in like 4th grade, but I did it anyways.
They weren't real estate agents.
Exactly.